You Might Be the Killer is a slasher horror comedy that has been on my radar for a while, and I recently got Shudder so I could do a movie marathon with a friend. And this movie is pretty lame, can't lie. Horror comedies have always been popular, but slasher horror comedies have sort of jumped into the fray with movies like The Final Girls, Happy Death Day, and The Amazing Freaky. You Might Be the Killer is one of those lower budget but lower rent ones where it tries to do something new, but it doesn't really have much to say. So we're instantly introduced to Sam. He discovers a couple bodies. He's the head camp counselor for his camp, and he's covered in blood. He's found the bodies of his friends. He's frantic. He locks himself into a cabin and calls the sheriff. Goes to voicemail. So he decides to call his best friend Chuck. She works at this video store, sort of like a Hot Topic. But basically, he starts telling her, all about his, horrific ordeal. However, one terrifying twist, he might be the killer. So the story jumps backwards to before the attacks. Basically, he is in charge of this camp. He gets to handpick all the counselors. And but then he talks about an urban legend, and they go and find a mysterious cursed mask. And when he accidentally puts it on, it overtakes his body and turns him into an unstoppable, vicious killing machine. And he starts dispatching all of his friends without mercy. So the reason why this movie isn't very good is that I feel the writing isn't up to par, but also the editing and the stylistic choices. Pretty much everything is pretty awful about the movie except for the gore. The main reason being that every time there's a death, they put this giant kill counter on the screen, which is kind of lame. But also, the movie isn't really interested in being an actual slasher. It's more of a comedy. And they also do a lot of quick cut editing for the kills, but then they repeat the footage over and over with a little bit more footage, and it just gets repetitive. It gets really repetitive, watching the same person get killed the same way, or a different angle. It almost feels like the movie's wasting its own time, because most of the movie is dialogue based, because Sam is hiding and explaining the plot and the backstory to his friend, played by Allison Hannigan, and she doesn't really get to do much except just be there, an open ear for him. So most of the movie is just him complaining to her on the phone, which is kind of a letdown. The kills aren't really cinematic because you don't get to see them in their entirety. They just cut to him like gutting a guy, and then and he's like, "Oh no, I killed a guy," and then there's not much going on. The last half hour does have some cool things. There's one great kill that happens near the end of the movie that's like uncut, and it's awesome, and that's the reason why it's great. And there's another one that's okay too. But overall, the movie does have gore. It has like the setup, the killer, the characters. It just doesn't present the story in an interesting way. Mainly because I think the origin of this movie is that two authors were talking about slasher tropes, and someone decided, hey, let's make a movie. And they produced the movie, the two authors, so they didn't really have much of a story going on. Everyone does a decent job acting, but the movie's not very funny either. There's some jokes here and there. The movie's not very funny. It's not an effective slasher. You kind of need those elements for a slasher horror comedy. I mean, I've seen, other. If you got to have one or the other, if you don't have both, and if you're not able to find that tonal balance, then it's just a waste, because the ending is also terrible, and just nothing really clicks in this sort of homage thing. It's meta, but it's not funny. It's not scary. It's not it's gory, but it's not cinematic. It's not a great slasher. It's not a great comedy, so it doesn't really know what it is. And so You Might Be the Killer is not a very effective movie, and I give it a 2 out of 10.